Yo, Joburg everybody, this is Steve, and today's video is a little bit unconventional for G.I. Joburg. It's a DIY video. Now we all know these guys are fused torsos, a lot like the Z children, Zarana, Zartan, and Xandar, but very distinct in a number of ways as well. Now there are tutorials dealing with the Zartan clan, and relatively few dealing with the Ninja Force, I guess because they're slightly less desirable. But as far as I'm concerned, this is my favorite Storm Shadow. No one can convince me otherwise. I even enjoy the Screaming Whirlwind feature. Okay, give it a little bit more of a wind-up, Steve. And Screaming Whirlwind! Okay, so fast you couldn't even catch that on camera. Now, the problem is, of course, their articulation is hampered by their feature. The fused torso is one thing, but the stops that they included inside the torso is something else, and something that I could not abide by, so I immediately shaved mine down so I had a full range of motion at the torso. Unfortunately, that left him with very wobbly and loose legs. You see, those blocks, those stops, provided a lot of support and kind of held him in place. So there was never really much tension on the O-ring. It only held the legs in their sockets. But now that I was manipulating him more, it relaxed that O-ring just enough to make him tragically floppy. It doesn't help the fact that because of the internal mechanism, and we'll get into that later, the O-ring is significantly lower in the torso. So there's much less space, much less distance between the hook and the point at which the O-ring is looped around. So even a standard size O-ring, even a new O-ring, would not tighten this guy up sufficiently. So we've got to find a new and creative way of shoring him up a little bit. Let me disassemble him, and we'll be back in a minute to address the issue. But just taking a look at a sacrificial lamb, I've managed to keep the action intact. But if we spring him open, we'll notice that the entire torso is fused. It took a lot of cutting, and that is a very, very undesirable method to use. It also scores the plastic in ways that even if you try joining it back together, you're gonna get rather unsightly little seam at all the points. It'll never be as flush as the factory job. So let's get Stormy apart and take a look at the guts. So with the absence of a back screw, you actually have to disassemble the entire leg assembly to get at the innards and get him separated. Minor inconvenience, wouldn't you say? Alright, so here we have the problem. See how low the looping point is on the inside of this torso. So this O-ring is actually very healthy. But because it's got such a short distance to try and be taut along, it's going to always be too slack for that nice, juicy, signature G.I. Joe snap. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, Toy Polloi suggests drilling an eye hole through that point and looping a fresh O-ring through. But that would make it even lower and even shorter a distance between the T-bar and the looping point. No, I've got another suggestion in mind, and it does involve a hack that he came up with, or at least that he made popular. You see, we're going to take this cord, and tie it around the pre-existing O-ring. Then feed that O-ring through so the cord goes along with it, and hopefully then spit it out on the other side. And once we've got the two ends, we can tie it a lot tighter and basically just reinforce that O-ring's tautness. Suck it in a little bit, because the cord will then run over the T-hook as well. Okay, so it's tied around the O-ring. But I foresee a problem already. That's not a very big clearance for that knot. But hey, we're gonna give it a bash anyways. If nothing else, this will be a a failed how-to, and that's instructional in and of itself. So let's feed this bad boy around. Right, it took some doing, and I must say I did consider cutting the O-ring a couple of times, but we are through. It's fed through the one end, and the knot has poked out the other. So now we're in business, baby. I can unknot it, and then we've got a sort of a double line going through. You see what I mean? It's the toy polloi fix, but Joburg. Looks like I did this operation just in the nick of time as well, because unfortunately this O-ring is starting to perish. You see those micro tears on its surface. It is the original O-ring, of course, so this guy is, what is it, 28-year-old rubber. As you can see, both ends now right through. We can give it a good tug. I will cut them to size and then tie them around the old T-bar and hook, and then give it a good hard tug, and hopefully that'll be that. Woohoo! Fiddly part coming up next. Okay, it's knotted. It's now on the inside of the rubber band. I could trim off the excess. Gonna leave it for now. Let's see how we go. Maybe I should put in a double knot. Extra security. I suppose it won't make too much difference in that clearance. Yep, let's give it another right over left, shall we? And then left over right. Zoop. Alright. It's not pretty, but it'll do the trick. Alright. Now the fiddliest part has got to be getting that waist piece on. And I'm not going to put you through that. Using my handy tweezers, I pulled it right through. So we are back in business, baby. Still haven't trimmed the excess. He's got some strange cords coming out of his backside. But I think already I'm beginning to feel a bit more tension with the legs in place. That'll hopefully be the acid test. Let's see what happens. Oof, I must say, with all the additional tension, getting these little metal nubs over the seating point is a little bit tougher. Not gonna lie. V-I-C, V-I-C, V-I-C-T-O-R-Y. Victory, victory is our cry. V-I-C-T-O-R-Y. It's done, guys. I pulled it through. I reassembled the legs. That was pretty damn fiddly, let me tell you. Rather do the entire leg before you try and get the inner thigh on the other side. That is of some assistance. Took me a while to figure that one out. I'll snip off the excess, and... Oh, Stormy, you're back, baby. You're back. You've got some rigidity in those joints. Granted, it's not quite as... Well, no, I say that, but it is pretty stiff. You know, slight pressure is not going to separate the two halves of his body. And he's got enough tension to allow him to hold poses and not flop forward as he did before. Oh, fantastic. Okay. I suggest stretching it out and then snipping so that the excess then shoots back into the cavity, leaving it nice and neat. But I'll give you a before shot now and an after now. Maybe I should do more of this on camera, but it's very satisfying. I pulled it taut, snipped it, and the excess just shot into the hole, never to be seen again. And Storm Shadow is looking very groovy, stiff. Okay, stiff at the waist at least. Still a little bit of give on the legs, but that's okay. He is a ninja after all. He's supposed to be limber. If you want to see the moment I got this exact same Storm Shadow, check that video. Now, this is Steve from Joburg saying, there's no need to buy a new Ninja Force action figure. You can repair him. You have the technology. Who needs a back plug? I am a weapon. Ah!